Going really well, thank you very much. Let's move to the third round table, a quite important one, really interesting, because with this we see that our actions go before our scope. We have migrant women and our actions and claims go beyond the borders in a European and international scope. That's why we have this third round table on European good practices for the political participation of women and in order to prevent political violence. It is going to be moderated by Irene Gomez Santos, regional MP of Podemos in the Valencian Parliament from 2015 to 2019 and also from 2019 to 2023. As you can see, we have an excellent group of women who are working in politics actively, not only those that have been elected, but also we have colleagues that have been in the electoral tickets, that they are here with us, and it's a pleasure for us because we need to be in all fronts, formal and informal. So I'm going to let's start with this last round table of today.
Okay. Okay. Sorry.
No, I don't need it.
No? No. Even in Spanish, is it good for you?
I understand.
Yes. Angelina, for you? Okay.
Ay. Voy a necesitar un temporizador. El temporizador, ¿no? Para las preguntas.
Bueno, buenas tardes a todas, a todos.
Good evening. This third round table on European good practices for the political participation of women and to prevent political violence has one goal, which is to identify and share effective strategies to foster the political participation of women and to tackle political violence. We will introduce some examples of successful initiatives at a local and international level, which help empower women in the political arena and also help prevent situations of violence. By providing a space to exchange experiences and knowledge, we try to empower other actors and organizations in order to implement these good practices to create a more inclusive and safer space for women in the field of politics. Besides, this roundtable tries to generate a debate on the importance of creating policies and mechanisms to ensure the full and free participation of women in the political arena. In order to do so, we have 4 speakers with us today. 4 women, 4 empowered women, brave women. We have Cecilia Rosa de Torre de Gas, Cecilia Torre from the Collectif de Femmes from Belgium, David Samonte, an International Solidarity Officer from Germany, Silvia Dimitrache, founder of the Association of Romanian Women in Italy, ADRI, and also Angelina Green, project coordinator at New Women Connectors from the Netherlands. Cecilia Torre at the institutional level is part of the Ecolo party. She's an MP in Valonia and a councillor in the Louvain City Council. She's been a candidate in the provincial and local elections. She has a master's in applied science by the University of Louvain in Belgium. She worked in Ecuador in the public administration, and she's been working for some years at the United Nations Development Program. She's been the founder of a group of women who focus on the training and fostering the political participation of women elected in the elections. She is a parliamentarian, as I said, of the Wallonia region and for a councilwoman in Louvain. To my right, I have Andy Samonte. She is in charge of the international solidarity of Gabriela. She is a political scientist and currently is studying at the University of Kassel. She was born and raised in Germany as a second-generation migrant. She spent her 20s in the Philippine academia, and she worked in the German cultural institution, and she was engaged in community-based initiatives. It was during this time that she gained deeper insight in the social movements and struggles of the Filipino people. Upon returning to Germany, she continued her academic journey while actively engaging in political work within the Philippine diaspora. She currently serves as the International Solidarity Officer for the German chapter of Gabriela, a Filipino women's political organization, and she's also the coordinator of the local chapter of the International Coalition for Human Rights in the Philippines. To my left, we have Silvia Dumitrache. She is the founder and president of Romanian Women's Association in Italy, ADRI. She voluntarily coordinates a transnational project in support of migrant families and is constantly involved in social solidarity, networking, facilitation, and advocacy activities. And last but not least, we have Angeline Green. She is a project coordinator. She has expertise in intercultural dialogue and communication. She has been working with the New Women's Connectors since 2021. Her background as a Mexican American in Hungary and now in the Netherlands. She studied cultural and organizational anthropology, which suits her to work in interdisciplinary settings, and as a lifelong migrant herself, she has a passion for making systems work for their intended target audience. She works as a facilitator, trainer, she helps writing reports and applications. She is also a researcher and a safeguarding point woman. These four women have an important background, and they're going to tell us about their innovative projects. I'm sure that we will be able to replicate some good practices. I'm going to explain the methodology of this roundtable. Each of the four speakers will have 25 minutes for their presentation. The last 20 minutes of the sessions will be an open dialogue with our audience. We have two questions for them. We will have a first round for the first question and then a second one for the second round, and then we will open the debate. The questions that we have are the following. Regarding the political participation of migrant women, the questions are, could you share some examples, some specific examples of initiatives and projects that have been successful in order to promote the political participation of women in their countries? And also, what do you think is the most important challenge in order to achieve a more equal political participation of women. Let's start giving the floor to Cecilia Torres.
Bien, yo voy a hablar
Well, I am going to speak mostly
solamente como ecofeminista,
as an ecofeminist.
porque durante muchísimos
Why?
años
Because for many, many years,
el movimiento feminista
I was part of the Latin American feminist movement, first in Ecuador and then in Latin America.
al venir a Europa,
And then when I came to Europe,
lo primero que
to Belgium, in order to study, the first thing that I did
fue buscar un
was to look for a women's group. And when I found a women's group,
pero que
they were Belgian, but they could speak on behalf of migrant women. Then two Latin American women started thinking why these women can talk about their situation as Belgian women, and we should talk about our situation as migrant women. And from there, a collective of 4 women,
tres belgas,
3 from Belgium,
una extranjera que
and a foreigner who worked as a housekeeper.
a trabajar el tema de las mujeres
Then we started helping them, but focusing on migrant women, because
vaina la nueva, les dejaban encerrando a las mujeres que también eran mujeres estudiadas
we also had women
en sus casas.
that had studied, and when their husbands came to study to Belgium, they had to stay home to do housekeeping. That is something that was quite shocking, and from that,
Que las mujeres belgas
what we did is to have migrant women focus on our themes. We have been looking for financing, and now the Women's Collective is an institution of migrant women where we have 30 women working full time.
con esa fuerza de decir
We started by saying we, as migrant women, need to own our situation as migrant, and we need to solve our problem. It's not them who need to solve our problems, but us. As ecofeminists, I say
muchos años
that for many years, well, we've spent many years in the feminist movement, but it was not enough. We were working for thousands of women in the NGOs, but
venían de los partidos políticos.
we didn't have the networks from political parties. That's why in Latin America we started to think that it was important. At first we said we do not want political power, we want to empower ourselves and be ourselves, and we want to do things ourselves. But then we realized that it was not like that. That empowerment
Empoderarte, pero
means to empower yourselves, but also to get into these patriarchal structures, which were the ones that were controlling our bodies, our lives, the structures
los anticonceptivos
that prevented us from using contraceptives. For instance, it was men who were deciding for us. The second time that I went to Belgium in 2015, as a grandmother, I said, okay, I'm going to get into politics, and since then I've been working in the field of politics since 2018 in a political party with which I feel identified. It's an environmentalist political party, and at the same time I said, okay, I'm going to work with this party, but I want to transform it. I want to transform this party.
muy solidarios con las mujeres.
They always showed solidarity towards women, but they did not really understand gender problems. When I was elected as a councilwoman,
Primera mujer alcaldesa
to be
a la nueva era la
chosen as the first mayor, as the first migrant mayor of Louvain-la-Neuve,
del número 23
I moved from position 27 to 10, and I was elected as a councilwoman. And when I was elected as a councilwoman, I talked to the mayor and I told her, look, we need to work in order to help women. We need to focus on. I wasn't talking about gender violence, but about violence as a rule. I told her, well, she told me, I have felt no violence. I don't feel I can work on this. So that's when I thought we need to focus on women's issues in the party. I looked for a couple of allies. They were not elected representatives, but they were part of the party, with the idea of training people inside our party to tell them about the gender perspective and what it meant within a political party. NGOs usually provide these kind of trainings, and we looked for one. And after 6 months, 6 months after I started my mandate, we were able to say we were always able to have our to start working on gender issues in our municipality. We started on the issue of finance. The councilman on charge of finance said, okay, I'm not familiar with this issue, but okay, let's go ahead. And then we moved on to another issue. We tried to stop violence against women, both domestically and also at the university level, because we know that there are rapings, that there's harassment, that they do not pass your test if you do not go meet with your professors. It's a high-level university, and this university didn't want to accept that there were cases of violence in the university. They didn't want to accept that because they are really important academically, and they didn't want to lose their ranking. When the municipality decided to work on this issue through a voting, a vote of confidence, only then were we able to organize a group to fight against violence, with the support of the universities, the police, social organizations, the city council, the social services in the municipality, and also students groups. That's where we started to focus on violence, and the university started to accept that there was violence against female students in the university. So the first step that we need to make is the following. We need to work within political parties. We need to raise awareness on the gender perspective. What is it about? Secondly, we need to look for allies. Dear colleagues, nothing that has been achieved in favor of women at a political level is for free. What political parties have given us was not for free. It was because of the struggle of the feminist movement in each country and in the whole world. We cannot stop fighting. Everything that has been achieved, the laws in each country that we have achieved, is because the feminist movement has been behind negotiating with political parties.
The law for abortion was because of the feminist movements, and now in Belgium, as there's a conservative party, they are taking this law back. What does the feminist movement have to do? We have to continue push again so that that is not stopped. Nothing is for free. Nothing is given as a present. We have to work. Women have to work for these things. That's why it's so important that as migrant women are a part of the parties. Nothing is going to give in as a present. If the immigrant women are not in the political parties, we're not going to achieve anything. And what's important is, being a politician, introducing the gender agenda in the political party. We cannot be used. We can't allow ourselves to be used. We must introduce the feminist agenda. We're going to work on 2 or 3 points that we're most interested in, and if they don't accept it, we have to leave. We have to be this clear. When I was invited to participate as a candidate, I asked them to give me the program, and there was nothing, absolutely nothing related to women. I introduced a couple of things elegantly, not even talking about reproduction rights. I introduced the topic of violence and they accepted it, but now they have had to accept a whole chapter on the gender perspective. You have 1 minute left, Rosa. That is the strategy we must follow in order to participate in the parties. Thank you.
Ahora el turno es de
Now the floor is for Debbie Samonte.
Hello. Should I just speak? Is it okay with the Okay, perfect. Okay, now you can hear me, right? I mean, I think most of you are wearing the translations anyways, but, well, good afternoon from my side. I'm very thankful to be here and to have been invited. I'm a little bit nervous. I'm not as trained as all of the women that I've seen today that are here that have spoken. So please bear with me. I have to stick to my notes a little bit more compared to the other speakers. But anyways, good afternoon, sisters, fellow comrades. I'm Debbie. I'm from Gabriela, Germany. Gabriela, as was mentioned already, is a Filipino women's rights organization that has diaspora organizations almost worldwide, working with and for Filipino migrant women. I'm personally working with a chapter in Germany. So yeah, I mean, getting together here and learning so much, addressing this topic of women's political participation is so important, and I think especially focusing on migrant women, as this is often overseen in the center of Europe or the Western world, as we are at the intersection of all those marginalizations or multiple layers of marginalization. And yeah, personally, I am, as was also mentioned, a second-generation Asian migrant woman. My mom migrated to Germany from the Philippines. I'm also a political scientist and activist working in Germany. That's why this topic is so dear to my heart, but also, of course, very pressing, as all around the world, women face political repression, systemic barriers also in general to entering political spaces at all. And then if they do, they endure this institutionalized or political violence. So as to start and to set a concrete example, I want to share about Gabriela a little bit more. As you know, Sylvia and I just talked over lunch earlier, and she was, we were talking, and she already knows Gabriela. She's working in Italy. There are so many Filipino migrants in Italy, and the first thing she said, yeah, the Filipinos, they're united. And that also stuck with me because that's actually an interesting point. Filipino migrants, or also like Filipino organizations, people's organizations in the Philippines, in our homeland, have a very clear basis on what to aim for. And even the migrant organizations globally, they have this kind of joint spirit somehow, I think, that has stuck with a lot of other groups who have met people from our organizations. So yeah, I will start a little bit with the history of Gabriela. It's Philippine grassroots-based organizations. We've been talking so much about political participation on an institutional level, but political participation starts on the ground, I think, and I think it's so important to see Why does it take so much time for women to get there, to get into elections or the electoral sphere, into parties, and what can we do for women as their first step to find their voice? So yeah, coming back to the history of Gabriela, it's a grassroots-based alliance of more than 200 organizations and desks and institutions in the Philippines. It's represented throughout all regions in the Philippines, in the centers, in the provinces, and it stands as a very powerful example of grassroots organizing. And it was founded in 1984, actually during one of the darkest periods during the dictatorship, Marcos dictatorship in the Philippines. Yeah, at that time, women were not only grappling with the impacts of gender inequality and systemic gender inequality, but also with the state violence and repression of a fascist dictatorship. And Gabriela was born as a response to these injustices. And it is named after Gabriela Silang. Gabriela Silang was a Filipina revolutionary leader who fought the Spanish colonization in the 18th century. So as so many Latin American people are here, we are your sisters in the East, 300 plus years of Spanish colonization. And Gabriela Silang was one of the few women who actually took up to arms and fought the Spanish colonizers. And this is the legacy that our organization, Gabriela, today, this legacy of fighting colonialism, today maybe neocolonialism, imperialism, and the courage and the resistance that we want to continue to carry. And the interesting thing with Gabriela is that in 2003, it transitioned from grassroots and activism work into the legislative arena in the Philippines and became, or part of the work of Gabriela becoming a Gabriela Women's Party list. The system is a little bit different from what we know here. Maybe I'm not aware with other systems outside of Europe, but there's like a party list system. So they exclusively focus on women's issues, and it's an interesting topic for Gabriela to have this evolution of a grassroots movement to have parliamentary presence as well, and to influence policymaking directly. This dual approach then is very vital, I think, also for Gabriela, for the work of Gabriela. For one hand, being rooted in community-based activism and work, and at the same time doing this institutional engagement. There's something we call SICA, maybe some of you have heard of it, I don't know. It's social investigation and class analysis that is very vital to our work, to speak to our communities, to the women in any kind of fields, and to figure out first what's their background, what are their backgrounds, what are their thoughts, what's their class background, to see how they can actually access decision-making for themselves, or even access their own voice somehow, in order to then translate that into the institutional sphere. And yes, building on this legacy of Gabriela Philippines, the Philippines or the Filipinos, I don't know if any of you ever had the opportunity to be on like a cruise ship or something, but like 60% of all cruise ship and also cargo ship workers are Filipinos, because the laborers are the only thing Filipinos export. It's the people that are being exported, probably, in other countries from the global south, it's similar. And so it has become the last decade or so, or maybe 15 years, that Gabriela diaspora organizations have emerged. It's also Gabriela. It's the name Gabriela. It carries the name Gabriela. It's part of the Gabriela Alliance in the Philippines. But then it's Gabriela Seattle. It's Gabriela Canada. It's Gabriela Germany. And it organizes the migrant women, or the Filipino migrant women, and then also focuses on Asian migrant women in the respective communities and cities where the chapter is working in. Let me check where I'm at. Let me go here. So, what do these organizations, diaspora organizations, focus on? it's creating community hubs and educating the women. The community hubs, they serve kind of as lifelines, you know, like who do I call when when I'm undocumented and I need to, I don't know what to do, I don't know who to, I don't have a lawyer, and my house is being raided now, and this kind of lifeline is what is meant. But then at the same time, we offer educational classes. I will talk about that more later on in the next question, solidarity and support. And the diaspora organizations then, though, don't only focus on addressing the individual and community needs, even though that's a vital part, but they also actively participate in trans-sectoral advocacy. So we collaborate with International Women's Rights Group, for example, like as we got to know the Red and the Red Group through White Plus and so on, but then also we collaborate with labor unions, migrant justice coalitions, women's human rights groups, to bring attention also to the systemic issues that affect migrant women and that create this kind of labor cycle that makes women migrate in the first place. And I will come to that with I mean, I guess, you know, like there's the question of what is the challenge? What are our challenges to political participation? And then our last question is about political violence. And I think, you know, political violence, and however we define it, I think is the most pressing challenge. In the context of Asian women, challenges are especially the kind of stereotyped, either domesticized and submissive kind of Asian women, or the hypersexualized Asian woman. Those are, I think, major issues in the context of racism and xenophobia that exist for the access of women into political participation. So what we take from these experiences and what we learn and what strategies are, I think first, what we learn and what we do as Gabriela is we start local. Political participations begins in our communities, and we need the women there to lead the way from where they are coming from where we are coming from. And empowering each other on a grassroots level, that creates the foundation for the broader political engagement. Second, I think, is the point of building global solidarity. The diaspora chapters, they demonstrate the power of connecting across borders to amplify marginalized voices and to learn from each other and to see how everything is connected. And international partnerships can also drive systemic change while fostering mutual learning. And third, we still have to keep our home in mind, so to say. I think so many of us are not from the center of Europe or from the so-called West, so-called developed countries, and the countries from the global south, the Philippines, countries in Latin America, the people and the women there, you and my mother's generation, those who came here, they are shaped by the deep and enduring struggles of oppression, patriarchy, and they are the experts. You are the experts here, and the experts also in dismantling this kind of oppression and fighting for justices. And finally, I guess, it's organize ourselves, each other, on a grassroots level, through civil society groups, or even through political movements, political parties at some point also. But this collective action and coming here together like we do now is, I think, our strongest weapon. And women who organize with each other and together, they gain not only a voice, but also the power to shape their own future, and then maybe at some point get into politics and make political change or electoral politics, so to say, if that's something that is prioritized and wished for. But yeah, so yeah, that's it from my side. Thank you.
Debbie.
Thank you very much, Debbie. Remember, These are two questions in one. I repeat them for the two next speakers. Could you share examples, specific examples of initiatives or projects or strategies that have promoted the participation of migrant women in your politics in the country? And what do you think is the most pressing challenge to achieve the more equal participation in politics for migrant women? Now it's the turn of Silvia Dumitrache.
Everybody, do you hear me? Do you hear me? Okay. I prepared a PowerPoint presentation because I answered of all three questions together. And so I hope I will have more time because I will give all the answers. Why do you laugh? First of all, thank you for having me. It is an honor and a pleasure to find me here. Thank you, Red Latinas. And I wrote that estoy muy contenta de estar aquí.
Bravo.
I'm the president of Romanian Women's Association in Italy. I'm a Romanian, native Romanian, live in Italy, and I'm a member of White Plus, a member of Romanian Women's Lobby, which is a member of European Women's Lobby. We, like an association, do not have funds, do not have grants, do not have money. We are all volunteers. But we succeed in making networkings. We try to find the right way and not give up. That's why we are all together here, because we are, and my hashtag is make noise. Okay. Women's in leadership and political participation was the first question. And I wanted to tell you that we published last year a study, the only study about political participation of migrant women in Italy. During I made this study, this research, I began to feel more and more sad. Because I live there. It's a far-right party leading Italy. It's very different from Spain. You have a lot of problems. You speak about it. For migrants in Italy is a nightmare. Okay, you are, let's say, fortunate to live in Spain. And the Global Gender Gap Report reveals that the world has closed 68.5% of the gender gap. However, the current pace, it will take another 134 years, equivalent of 5 generations to achieve full gender parity. Europe continues to be in the lead with a gender parity score of 45% and with 7 on the top 10 position held by countries from the region. Iceland remains the most gender equal country, having closed 93% of its overall gender gap. If you remember, last year, Iceland was the only country in the world that made a strike, half-a-day strike of women in Iceland. Okay, and Iceland is the unique country in the world that changed the parliament in a few hours, taking the streets and they have women, a party of women in their parliament. I don't know another country in the world to have a party made only by women. Okay. And my presentation is referring both Italy and Romania because I didn't know if I had to talk about Italy, being a Romanian living in Italy. That's why I tried to cover both countries. And Romania women represent 51% of the total number of inhabitants, but on the list of MPs during the last legislature, only 35% were women. There are several legislative initiatives in Parliament aimed at introducing gender equality, but it remains closed. Romania ranks last in the Union in terms of gender equality, and in the political field, the European Gender Equality Index shows that we have registered a considerable decrease in recent years. I don't know if you know that these days are elections, parliamentary elections in Romania. It's like a revolution because the Russians are trying to take power. I will explain later, if there will be enough time, how they succeed to arrive first at the first tour of election using TikTok. Okay, I will explain you later. And in the past legislature, only 18% of female senators and deputies were elected in parliament. Participation of migrant women in political and democratic life in Italy is the title of a research I told you about, and which is called Expanding Tools in Addressing Barriers of Migrant Women to Participate in Democratic Life, We Empower. Is that one? You can find it online. Effective participation of migrant women is necessary, as you told, that they can contribute their ideas and proposals to the development of societies they live in. However, in Italy, there are still many barriers to migrant women's visibility and voices in public, and few public spaces, and this is why it is important to have a deeper understanding of the context around migration, migrant women, and participation in Italy. Given the multiple barriers migrant women face in participation, the opportunities for them to play an active part in political life are very limited. While voting rights are exclusive to Italian and EU citizens, migrant women who are from non-EU countries have no possibility to vote in Italy. Okay. Additionally, female representation in Italian politics remains very low. In order to increase it, gender quotas and double gender preference measures have been introduced in administrative elections. Non-EU migrant women without Italian citizenship being excluded. Even more notable inequalities can be found in municipal and regional administration, where fewer than 15% of mayors are women. Furthermore, due to the low presence of women, low expectations and success are formed, which further discourages their participation. Our role as an ONG is to try to make us known, and we are very good, maybe, to make advocacy. That's why we have succeeded in convince some authors and the publics and Italians to write books about it, about us, to make movies and to make documentaries. Last week was a movie. I presented a movie which is called Sindrome Italia. Maybe I will have the opportunity one day to talk about it. It's a kind of burnout syndrome, and of that syndrome suffers many domestic workers that make also suicide, or their children take their lives in the country of origin. They are called left behind children of white orphans. This is not the place, but I will tell you one day about it. And we succeeded also to provoke and to sustain a recommendation of the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe, which says that leaving millions of labor migrants, children, without parental care is a violation of human rights. All countries need to acknowledge the scale of this phenomenon and the long-term damage it creates, and to put in place comprehensive approaches to labor migration which are child-centered, human rights-based, gender-sensitive, and socially and economically sustainable. States should privilege a form of labor migration which enables children to migrate together with their parents if they wish to. The MPs called for a series of measures, including social and educational support for left-behind children, for their family reunifications, and keep together transnational families. Protecting and promotion fundamental rights of migrant women in Europe. The protection of the rights of migrant women confronts us with multiple forms of discrimination, including sexism, racism, xenophobia, labor exploitation, as you know, and human trafficking. I'd like to tell you why in Italy is only it's only association, only one association of migrant women, Romanian women. It's terrible human trafficking, and children left behind in Romania. There are mafia that they are searching for their children to traffic and to put them in prostitution. Okay. And I was followed by mafia, and I had to go to the police to let them know that they send me a message to be aware of what I'm talking about. A more decisive support of women, inclusive of migrant women involved in politics in the board term of the world will be necessary, inviting them to debates and to exchange good practices, which we are doing now. There needs to be a coordinated response to a gender-sensitive approach, like you said, when it comes to migrant integration, particularly to enhance the participation of migrant women. The importance of solidarity, thank you. International and transnational support in strengthening the feminist movement's capacity to address the challenges effectively. Gender-based violence against women is a serious violation of the human rights. But with the procedure for US ratification of the Council of Europe Convention on Preventing and Combating Violence Against Women and Domestic Violence, the EU has committed to adopting a gender perspective in all its measures to prevent violence against women. Civil society reaction to the adoption of the EU Directive on Combating Violence Against Women and Domestic Violence says we call on European Commission to review the directive in the next few years and to work towards comprehensive and inclusive measures to address all forms of sexual and gender-based violence without discrimination. The last directive excludes migrant women. I don't know if you know that. We are not in it. This is a case, I will not read it because it makes me very sad. It's the only colored woman that it was a deputy in Italian parliament, and she had to leave Italia and go abroad because talking about her in the parliament, members of Italian government said that when I see pictures with Kyenge, it's the lady, I can't help but think of the features of an orangutan. I don't know the name. And she was present there, okay. And Congolese monkey. She faced death threats and lived under police protection. Institutional violence in European countries regarding the women's political participation. By the way, I am a federal deputy for the Greens in Italy, and I'm running for Senate in Romania these days. Women continue to be underrepresented in EU countries at all levels of political decision makings, as well as in political parties. All EU citizens living as residents in Italy and registered as resident in the local community are legally entitled to vote, as I told you. Third country nationals do not have the right of vote, and access to the right to vote for migrants only in the local level. We do not have, these days in the Italian parliament, there is one migrant man, only one. Romanian Women's Association in Italy, together with the majority of migrant organizations in Italy, denounced these issues, advancing concrete proposals inspired by the policies of European democratic countries. This is my presentation. This is the party in Romania that I'm a member of. Is the only party that have gender deep elections. If there is a woman first, then next is a man. And I wrote here some things about diaspora, Filipina diaspora. I know a woman in Milan. She's a Filipina woman. She's an Italian citizen. She had to adopt her own children to bring them in Italy. This is the world we live in Italy. We are very happy. And that's our policy, the only things we can do without money, but with your solidarity is to stick together, to make networking, and for preventing violence, our association inform people, and we are trying to educate women, both in Italy and in Romania. If you don't know, Romania is the country with the most minor mothers in the world. Okay. Girls about 13, 14 years have 3 children. Okay. And I will answer gladly at your questions. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, Silvia.
Thank you very much, Silvia. Silvia Dimitrake. Well, our methodology has changed a little bit, but your presentation was excellent. Now it's the time for Angelina Green. I would like to remind you that we are still answering to the first question regarding the political participation of migrant women.
I speak Spanish, but I wouldn't give it the eloquence I think that is needed for this discussion, so I'll be speaking in English. Thank you to all of you who are present, and especially all of you who live in Valencia, for opening up your city to us at such a vulnerable time. Thank you to everyone who I've spoken to, and also those who I haven't in the last few days, for all being here. First, I'll talk a bit about some examples of what has been done as far as political participation goes. I work with an organization called New Women Connectors. We focus on a feminist perspective to migrant and refugee inclusion in policy at an EU level. We are based in the Netherlands, so I'll be giving a bit of specific information about the Netherlands, statistics and such later on. So again, our focus is mainly on a policy level, and also about building positive role models that display women and migrants and displaced people as more than just passive beneficiaries, but active members of our community and people with something to contribute. Also deeply embedded in our work is the interconnectedness of colonialism, patriarchy, and capitalism as systems that all uphold each other. The discrimination and barriers faced by labor migrants, considered labor migrants instead of expats, barriers to access of information once people already live in the country, and shortcuts to regularization that are experienced by a select few. One of the things that we try to highlight is the need for a changed narrative and the need for more empowerment, as in order to get to a stage where one is ready to politically participate, one has to have community understanding and knowledge, and that's kind of the area that we try to work on, is providing sessions with those with lived migration and displacement experience to learn more soft and hard skills about how to be present in political discussions, as well as convening spaces for politicians, municipality employees, other decision makers to meet and discuss policies with migrants and refugees, especially women and other marginalized groups. So, I'll talk about 3 examples, 2 of which New Women Connectors has done, and 1 which was another organization earlier in the 2000s. So first I'll talk about our mentorship and ambassador program, which had open trainings including participation and facilitation skills, knowledge about EU bodies and how to participate, as well as how to communicate with your local policymakers and what spaces are available for participation. These trainings were open to anyone globally, and from these we selected 5 EU-based ambassadors for our organization, in which we provided them with one-on-one mentorship, a stipend so that they could perform an internship in their local organization or local area. And in this way we try to not give information to one specific group, but rather provide it to people throughout Europe so that then they can disseminate their learnings to their own communities. In this way, we also had 2 people specifically interested in politics, one of which became involved with a youth group in their municipality in the Netherlands, talking specifically about the availability of youth housing and how to increase displaced people or migrants' accessibility to this housing. And someone in Bulgaria who is now working on creating a manifesto of laborers migrant laborers in Bulgaria so that they can then implement this with the Chamber of Commerce and business authorities in Bulgaria. The second example that I'll share was also a program done by New Women Connectors in collaboration with other European organizations that focused on bringing together migrants with municipalities to discuss how they can better convene and discuss participation mechanisms, starting with kind of trainings with the municipalities individually, asking them what do they provide as far as support for migrants goes, and then having trainings with those with migration background and asking them what do you need, bringing them together, matching those up, and then seeing what spaces we're missing and where can we do better. From that, there was the creation of, this was with 5 municipalities, and there was the creation of 5 consultative bodies with these individuals and organizations involved in the project, in which they were also funded. That's a key issue that we try to really propose in our work, is if you are having people to do work in working hours, to provide their expertise and their lived experience, that is expertise and it should be compensated. Crazy take. The final example that I'll give is one from 2006 by another Dutch-based organization, kind of similar roadmap as far as gathering people with migration lived experience and trying to promote policy change. This was called Immigrant WMO Watchers. And this was with, at the time, earlier, in the 60s and 70s, there was a large influx of migrants to the Netherlands because of the end of colonization in mainly Suriname and in Indonesia, as well as a large influx of labor migrants from Turkey and Morocco, who later had families who joined them. So there was a lot of these kind of newer second-generation immigrants that were now being born into the Netherlands, and they were wondering how can we make this link between these communities and the local governments. And so they created a program specifically for mothers of school-age children to discuss what they felt was missing in their children's lives, but also in their kind of integration journey. So how do we make this go both ways? And that is going to be the challenge that I'll say for the second half of this question. The biggest challenge is that it doesn't go both ways. A lot of the time, there is a lot of Dutch theory around migration centers around the idea of rootedness. Rootedness is basically how when you see someone, we immediately kind of ethnicize or racial profile this person. We see them as their culture is a part of them that cannot be taken away from them, whereas if you see a Dutch white person, it's like it doesn't have as much of a stake in their daily life, or it's seen to not have as much of a stake. And because of that, the Netherlands also has a very kind of specific position as a place that is seen as very progressive internationally. And I think in a way they kind of use that as a shield to kind of mask their more discriminatory policies, because it's seen that they are already miles ahead. And I think that that's also the attitude that is taken when it comes to migrant and refugee, and especially migrant and refugee women's opinions, is we know better than you because we're more progressive than you, so we can do our thing and you can come along. Not true, also not effective. There is quite a lack of feeling of trust in the government, I feel, especially among migrants. They feel that it doesn't really work for them, and because of that, they don't participate. And because of that, also, there isn't enough knowledge on how to participate. I did a bachelor's research in a primarily migrant neighborhood in Amsterdam, where I live, and this neighborhood was built in the 60s and 70s to accommodate a lot of these incoming migrants. 18% of people who were eligible to vote in municipal elections in this area of the city voted. 18%. Dismally low, like really bad. And kind of my justification or reasoning for this links back with this failure to provide comprehensive and holistic policies for migrants. People don't have basic needs met, kind of following Maslow's pyramid. You have to first take care of physiological, safety, belonging, self-esteem, before you can start to worry about self-actualization, which is at the top of the pyramid, which is about political participation, making yourself and your opinions known, and forming, real community ties. And unfortunately, systems such as housing and this single-way integration system don't really facilitate people to have the time and the space and the knowledge to participate actively politically. Let's see. Yeah, there's a lack of compromise generally. Many language barriers within access to information, beyond the fact that non-citizens can't really vote in bigger elections. The only thing that I can vote in, for example, as a person with a non-EU passport living in the city I live, for example, in Amsterdam West. I can vote on the 300,000 euro budget that the city gets for a year. Where do I want things to be built in Amsterdam West? Specifically that part of the city, that's it, basically. I can't vote in any elections bigger than this, so. Also, many of the initiatives that are brought about to increase meaningful participation are often band-aid solutions, or they are not really with an eye to meaningful participation. What I mean by this is people are not being compensated for their time. They're being invited to events that are in Dutch, which I have personal experience with. If you're inviting a migrant-led organization to talk about integration and you're holding that in Dutch, you're only accessing people who are already very far along in that journey, and it's not a comprehensive picture of what you're trying to do. And lastly, kind of with the challenges part, is I will say there's, this grueling underrepresentation of migrants, and especially migrant women, in politics there, and I'll talk a bit more about that after the next question. But this kind of underrepresentation fuels this idea that this isn't for me, they don't care about me, I don't know really what to do about it, so I'm just not really gonna do anything because that's not for me. And I think that and the Western European ego, in a way, are kind of the main challenges in the Dutch context, I would say. As for some recommendations, more information in more languages. There's a lot of international students, for example, that come into the Netherlands. The university does not really provide any information about your trajectory after your studies, visa possibilities, for example, or what political participation you can have as a non-EU student, things like this. More spaces to convene. Also places that are flexible. For example, if someone needs to work 9 to 5, Monday through Friday, and their local community center is only open until 5:30 or 6, you can't make a community like this. Also providing childcare to people in politics. I'll again talk about that a bit later. Also more funding and a recognition of more women-led and migrant-led organizations. I'm sure that that's something that is felt by many people in the room. Actually, only 12% of migrant-led organizations in the Netherlands are women-led also, 12%, so we need to see a bit more of that. And also going beyond quotas. Diana, from the first panel, I was quite inspired by what you had to say, that kind of reference groups or unpaid bodies are not sufficient for real meaningful change. It's a good first step, but in order to create something more long-lasting together, we have to look beyond just ticking a box and putting a Band-Aid on it and saying that you did it and moving on. So, ta-da.
Thank you very much. Now we are going to move to the second question about political violence. This is the question. Have you detected the presence of political violence, institutional violence in your countries in Europe regarding the political participation of women? If so, what are the strategies of measures that are being implemented in order to face and mitigate this situation? Let's start with Debbie. No, sorry. Yes, Debbie.
Sorry, give me a sec. Need to regroup. Okay. So let me share first. So the moment I read this, of course we also had the question first. The moment I read this, I was like, what do you mean political violence, institutionalized violence, coming from a background in the Philippines or like other more repressed communities and countries, or like there are no extrajudicial killings here. I mean, not really in a big scale. Maybe there are, we don't know. Let's leave it at that, but there are like no extrajudicial killings. People are not being abducted. What do you mean political or institutionalized violence? So then thinking more about it, I was like, okay, how do I feel and how do I see how my mother's generation and other women feel getting into the sphere of raising their voices, and what kind of violence do they experience that is not the typical thing that I was thinking of in the first moment. And then also in the connection context of the first question, the lack of our access to participation. It's not that we don't participate per se, what we've all agreed on today, right? It's really the lack of access. And what hinders us is partly or mostly the fact that there is systemic violence happening in political spheres. So I'm going to answer this question a little bit with elaborating the situation of migrant women in Germany in general, and also Asian migrant women, and then talk about what Gabriela Germany specifically does. Not in the context of the diaspora organization or Gabriela Philippines, but specifically what are our projects and how do we work in Germany to counteract violence, or so to say, kind of oppression for women who want to participate in civil society or in politics. So the whole context of institutionalized violence, I guess, reflects an interplay. Of course, there's the gender layer, but then also the economic exploitation that affects women specifically to a higher level, migrant women to an even higher level, than the structural exclusion and cultural marginalization. And as we've concluded also in the first two roundtables, many first-generation migrants, they arrive through labor migration, family reunification, or as refugees, and they're driven by economic necessity. It's a kind of a way of coercion, It's not like those expats, white expats who are like, hey, I think I want to go to the US, I want to work for some, fossil fuel organization, fossil fuel transnational company. But it's really a kind of a coercion that is not so easily grasped because people feel like they can still decide. They still decide to go abroad and migrate. But then again, is it really a decision? And in Germany, while migrant women's contributions are very essential to sectors like healthcare, domestic work, and the service industry, they often occupy some of the most undervalued and precarious roles in the labor market. And of course, these jobs are usually characterized by the long hours and very low pay, little security, and there is no time to get involved at any point, like also what Angeline just mentioned. If you have to work 12 or 16 hours a day, how do you even find community, and how do you fight against this kind of systemic situation that is given, that you cannot really, or that you feel powerless about? And then additionally to that, there comes all the systemic barriers in a sense of the restrictive visa policies or voting policies that were already mentioned. And this dynamic traps migrant women in a cycle of economic vulnerability and compounded by those intersecting challenges of racism, sexism, xenophobia. And these structural inequalities perpetuate our marginalization furthermore. And they also highlight how systemic inequalities embedded in migration flows and labor dynamics affect us as migrant women. this kind of artificial economic disparity between nations, they drive migration, while receiving countries like Germany, for example, they benefit from the labor without providing adequate protections or pathways to empowerment. And once in Germany, migrant women are incorporated into the system that values the work, undervalues, so to say, but it doesn't value our humanity. And it leaves us vulnerable to exploitation and abuse while offering little or no ways to demand change at all. So yes, racism, xenophobia, and sexualized violence are the most pressing ways of systemic violence that migrant women face. At the same time, they're also scapegoated for social and economic problems, creating a climate of hostility that deters our involvement. And then, as I've mentioned earlier, Asian women in particular also face stereotypes that cast us as docile or hypersexualized, and reinforcing exclusion on an everyday life as well. And these narratives, they uphold a system that takes advantage of societal division, gender division, class division, race division, and the systematic oppression of women, and especially non-white women. And how do we address this kind of violence? What does Gabriela Germany do specifically in the context of how our ideological and organizational aims that I elaborated earlier are manifested? In Germany, we employ three key approaches. Number one is political education for our community. Number two, the community building. And three, the international solidarity. For in the educational discussions, we even have like our abbreviation, like it's our EDs. It's very like a common thing that I think Filipino organizations know of. Our so-called educational discussions, or EDs, they encourage Filipino migrant women to critically analyze their experiences within the broader context of the global economic and social systems. So our discussions together with our fellow Filipinos are supposed to illuminate how the undervaluation of care work and systemic marginalization of migrants and the exploitation of women are all interconnected. And then we're connected to this system of, or this larger systemic patterns, so that women are empowered to understand that our challenges, that we understand that our challenges are not individual failings, but the result of a system that is designed to prioritize profit, power over human dignity. And this awareness inspires in individuals not only their own resilience, but it inspires collective action. It makes us realize, okay, we are stronger together and we can do something together, and we have to organize so that things can be changed and that we can be the change. And it fosters a sense of agency, you know, into those women who organize with us, who felt powerless before. And this kind of building community is such an important part of it. I experience it myself a lot. I mostly do my political work in a city where I don't live. And it's really hard for me because sometimes I'm just at home where I do my wage work and I have stuff to do, and then my political work I do online or by myself. And I feel so lonely sometimes. You know, we've mentioned it before, how this is really an effect on migrant women, or like women also that from who are second generation, that don't belong here nor there. Building community is such a vital part, so we don't get lost in our heads. We don't get lost with the powerlessness. Because migration and the labor market, this is what they want. You're supposed to sell your labor and that's it. That's what you do every day in and day out. You don't have time to think about, you don't have energy to think about anything else. And with Gabriela, we also want to do this in connecting spaces, creating spaces where women can reconnect with their cultural identity. So it's very vital for us to stay connected to the Philippines. We do a lot of, we watch Filipino movies, we sing karaoke, we eat Filipino food. It's mostly to remember where we're coming from and to remember why we're here together. And then all of a sudden there's like a PPT that is about like, okay, why is there like a forced migration? And then we start talking about it. It's just in the background of us celebrating a birthday or something.
Un minuto.
Okay. And lastly, in Gabriela, Germany, as I've mentioned before, which is a vital part for us, is international solidarity. We do this on the one hand locally. Of course, we collaborate with other migrant women's organizations in Berlin and Germany that address labor exploitation, racial discrimination. And I think it's a common problem that at this point it's really, sometimes it's about ideological struggles and can we get along? Is this like a good partnership? Is this good to collaborate? But I think the important thing there is to remember, okay, we have to find the common ground. We have to find the one common thing in order to overcome the whole ideological problems that divide us even more. And globally, Gabriela, Germany engages in advocacy through the International Women's Alliance. I wanted to mention that because we talked about networking and everything, and I think we don't have to make everything new. There are a lot of global and European women's alliances that already exist. We are engaged in the International Women's Alliance, or IWA, IWA, and the International Women's Alliance is an anti-imperialist grassroots global alliance, which includes institutions, networks, and individuals as well, committed to advancing the social liberation and gender equality of women worldwide. So if anyone is also interested in building a further united front and to getting connected also with IWA and Gabriela in general, please feel free to come up to me. I will leave tomorrow morning at 6 a.m., so today is the only chance, but I'll be happy to connect even more. That's it. Thank you for listening.
Gracias, Debbie. Nos quedamos con...
Thank you, Debbie. We stay with your message. We're stronger together and we have to create communities. Now is the time of Silvia De Vitraki to reply to the second question.
It's because my presentation was made earlier. For me, poverty is a cause of underrepresentation. To give an example, Great Britain is no longer a part of EU, okay? But in Italy, also in Romania, they are not called migrants. They are called strangers, foreigners, because they are not poor. The same for Japanese. They are not called migrants. They are foreigners. Another motive is, for me, violence in politics and institutional violence, the lack of possibility to work in your own country. You have to migrate for work. This is a government obligation, but they don't care. That's why we have to leave our family behind and go abroad to work. This is a violation, institutional violence for me. And I think that many of our topics are the same with women, native women in all the countries. That's why I I prefer not to speak about Romanian women, Spanish women, but about women in general, because we have to be united. I'm not interested to make a war with Italian women or with Spanish women. We have to find the common ground, because we are in the same boat. Okay, that's all.
Gracias.
Thank you, Silvia. I felt your message that we have to find a common ground. We're going to stay with this message. Now it's Angelina's turn, and she will reply the second question.
Saw this question. I struggled similarly a bit as a person who, again, the Netherlands is perceived as quite a progressive country, not so much since the elections, but before. At least that's the vision that I had in my head when I migrated there. Again, there is not violence in the streets against women. There are not women being, well, there are, but there are women being threatened in politics, especially those of a non-white background. And this is a real issue in the Netherlands. I was looking into this with a bit of a, I wasn't expecting to find much, honestly, because of just, women in politics in the Netherlands, not that much of a discrepancy. While it is still under the norm, it is at 39% of the House of Representatives is female. The majority of the issues come along when you put any other intersecting identity along with gender, whether it be physical ability, race or migration background, sexuality, then things become a bit more dicey. Primarily through more bottom-up as far as negative narratives and xenophobia and sexism go, but I'll also be talking about some examples of more institutionalized forms. Another reason that I struggled with this question is because it's not very easy to find statistics that straight out say examples of this. Almost everything that I could find was a proxy for something else. But in a short answer, yes. When I looked into finding a more concrete definition of institutional violence, I found a report by this organization, by the Red, and it defined it as physical, sexual, economic, psychological harm or suffering on women, perpetuated or tolerated by the state. The tolerated part is what made me overarchingly say yes to this question. Because a lot of the forms of institutional violence, I think, that I had in my mind before I read this definition, it was very different than what I thought after this. There is, as I mentioned, underrepresentation of women. It's less than 50%, but in a more obvious fashion, there are parties, including the Christian Union Party, did not allow female representatives in the party until about 5 years ago. This is a quite overt form of discrimination. There are also ongoing issues within government. This is more less specific to the gender issue, but there was a party member of the New Social Contract Party who about a week ago stepped down under the claim that there were racist remarks made in a parliament meeting and she did not want to be associated with that party anymore. A few of her other party members after this also stepped down in solidarity with her. 3 days later, she said that it wasn't racist, it was just polarizing remarks. Because if you accuse someone of racism, it is seen as a crime, and my assumption is that someone got to her in the next few days and said, look, you really can't do that. So this is still happening. This was a week ago, less than a week ago, that this is happening. So there is definitely, at an institutional level, some form of silencing and some form of, you better stick to the status quo, otherwise you're not appreciated in this space. Going on to more kind of bottom-up methods that are tolerated, there is severe harassment of non-white female politicians in the Netherlands. And there's also a lot of harassment towards local political figures. So I actually read about a study where on Twitter, I still call it Twitter, on Twitter, again, not the most reliable place. People really speak their minds there in a quite hateful way, but still, it's still part of the public discourse. There was a vast majority of negative comments and representations of politicians were about women of a non-white background with severe toxicity, identity attacks, and profanity compared to all other groups, including non-white male politicians and white female politicians. Also, not super connected, but still kind of, in my opinion, very important to understand the positionality of intersecting identities with gender in the Netherlands is that 90% of Islamophobic incidents that were reported in the last 5 years were against women. 90% is a shocking statistic. Like, really blew my mind when I saw this. So, again, just a lack of discussion on the importance of women as victims and as people who have to put up with this, these negative attitudes. It also does things to a person's psyche to see this reproduced around them. Of course, you don't want to be put on an even bigger screen when you're already getting so much thrown at you for just existing as a person in your society. Also found, while I was looking into this subject, that not only is this lack of participation something that is kind of swept under the rug and we don't really talk about it because we think that we're progressive. No, it's extremely obvious and they don't try to hide it at all. According to a research and an integration of migrant women is not a policy priority in the Netherlands. This is stated as fact after interviews and after a coalition agreement from 2017 to 2021. This is very recent, and they're just saying this out loud, that not only is there no intersectional perspective, but there's no attempt for an intersectional perspective, which is unfortunately what is not being done. As the question said, if so, what is being done? Not much. There is no work with a specific gender angle. There is some as far as just general migration goes, but I think that the sentiment is much more, we build up on the things that are underneath political participation first, and then if we get to that bridge, then we cross it when we get to it. But at the moment, as far as women's participation goes, there are no direct actions happening. And yeah, a lot of it is just an issue of xenophobic, racist, sexist rhetoric that believes that women are incapable of holding the same positions as men, or that they are inextricably tied to their gender in some way that men are not, in the same way that certain people are seen as inextricably tied to their culture, race, ethnicity, in a way that native Dutch people are not. So, yeah, I just wanted to highlight kind of those different perspectives, both in the institutional level and also more on the bottom up. Unfortunately, they both exist. And I also wanted to wrap up by kind of mentioning something that, that one of my fellow panelists mentioned about the importance of coming together. I know it's not a very clean segue, but I also just wanted to remind all of you that this is one of the most important things that we can do in our work, is exchange, learn, and discuss, and that advocacy and kind of the good fight is not only about fighting, but it's also about celebrating the joys and the victories and the working together. So, thanks.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, colleague Angelina, for your final words. And now we have the participation of Rosa Cecilia Torre to close the panel, to close this section of questions, and then we will move on to the public participation with some very brief and concise questions. I will be very brief. I don't need the PowerPoint because I will change my participation after listening to my colleagues. I want to summarize what my colleagues have said about violence. When we speak about violence, of political violence, we must think that we are speaking about systemic violence. That's what the colleague from Filipinas said, and also our colleague from the Netherlands. Why is it systemic? Because we are the result of a patriarchal society. This patriarchal society has set some really clear roles. It has told us women in the private space, men should be in the public space. And women stayed in the private space for many years. But life, the necessities made us. The women that gave birth to children stayed in the house to reproduce the labor, to create well, we found ourselves in a situation where we also had to go out to work in the space that was set for men. That was already an invasion that we did. As it is an invasion, we cannot reclaim, ask the men to carry out the work that's carried out in the private space. So we continue carrying out the 8-hour domestic work and the 8 hours of work to earn a salary. After many years we said, no, I don't only want this public to conquer this public space, I also want to conquer the political space, because my freedom, my body, my territory should not be governed by men. We want to take decisions and dictate the laws for ourselves. That wasn't accepted at all, and up to now men can't stand us entering the politics, and sometimes our political colleagues from the parties still say, hey, you should go back to the kitchen, because for them that is our space. That is why we have to keep fighting to earn this space. We have earned some quotas. They didn't give us the political parties. We fought to reach the quotas to become candidates, not to win yet. We haven't reached that because women still don't vote for women, because we still have this patriarchy in our heads. We have achieved the laws, and now we need to change the mindset of ourselves, even of our own selves, because now in the house it is the mothers who don't allow the children, the boys, to go to the kitchen. We don't allow the boys to cry, because we say no, that is not their role. That is why we should change the mindset and start fighting against this patriarchal systemic violence. And in the political space, that's the hardest place to do this. It's really hard for us to say, I'm going there and here's where I want to fight, and I want to be a winner in this space because I am able to achieve this. I'm not only able of being a councillor of social affairs, but also of political affairs, of economic affairs, of scientific issues, because I am here, I have arrived, and that is the change we'll need in our heads. I think, colleagues, dear friends, we should fight against this systemic violence, which is not the violence of the parties that we feel on a daily basis. It is the system, the patriarchy, which is still dominating, and we have to beat it. That is why I agree with all my colleagues here that we need to be together, work united. If we're not united, not only to fight against the Migration Pact, but to fight against this patriarchal system. The far right is the patriarchal system, the right is the patriarchal system. If we do not fight against them, they are getting the space of education. The budget of education is being reduced dramatically in every country. And the ones that have right-wing parties are reducing the education budget even more. And also the health budget. And for reproductive health, the budget is being reduced in more than 70%. And it is our health, not men's health, it's our own health. And if we don't defend this, as the women from the movement, from the activist movements or women politicians, if we don't defend this, nobody will do it for us. That is why we have to fight against this systemic violence. From here, we must create a European network of migrant women, because besides being women, we are migrant women. We are in an even lower category. And if we don't get together to fight against the patriarchal system, nobody is going to fight for us. That is why the parties must deliver training in the gender vision, but we also have to speak about what being a migrant means, what being a welcoming city is, what being received with human rights, receiving migrants with a human rights perspective. But we're the ones who have to fight for this. Therefore, we have a task ahead of creating a collective of women with this mandate of creating a European network of migrant women, not Latin women, but migrant women in general, because we're the most affected in these politics, these right-wing policies that Europe is carrying out. Unfortunately, the fact that we have women such as Ursula in Europe, she doesn't represent us. We need to train the next generation of women. We must train them in the feminist agenda. Ursula is worse than any man you can face. She has now put as a vice president a man from the extreme right, and that has to be accepted, unfortunately. So our task is to get together to work against this system, or what my colleague said, we have systemic violence, this patriarchal violence. If we do not get together to fight against this, nobody will do it for us. And it's really difficult to work just in an isolated way in our countries. We need to get together with migrant, African, Arabic, Filipino, women from every country to fight against this patriarchal right-wing system which is affecting us, which is terrible, and which is going to affect my children and my grandchildren and my great-grandchildren. We have to fight. Well, long life to women. We should celebrate women. We must get together to move on, to move forward. Otherwise, we won't achieve anything. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Cecilia. Now we're going to move on to question time. Please, very brief and concise questions. We will have 3-4 questions. I suppose these questions will be for all the panelists. Angela? I will be very concise. Cecilia, you have just said, you've used 2 words that I haven't understood very well. I don't know why. Talking about the public space, you have said that as if it was determined by men, first, and secondly, invasion, as if the women had invaded the public space. We're talking about the public space, which, therefore, us as women, this is a space that also corresponds to us. I mean, what I mean is something else is that men had assumed that the space was their own, and that is where the struggle is, but it's not an invasion from our side, and it's not determined by them. I think that words are important, and I think that those two words had to be corrected. Regarding Sylvia, I would like to know which work they do with the books. You have spoken about all the tools you use in the organization. You have stories, books, cinema, documentaries. What scope does this work have, and how do you work with these materials?
But ¿sí? Vale, pues ya está.
Otra pregunta.
Another question?
Documentaries, films, those kind of educational materials.
Can I answer?
No, vamos, más preguntas.
Excuse me.
No, we have more questions. It's actually very exciting to have these women in the transnational level, and seeing that together we can create this great network of migrant women in Europe and even in the world, because as you say, Cecilia, there's a lot to do, and patriarchy cannot beat us. I want to ask Silvia, as she's in Italy. We see that a woman is governing in Italy, a woman who is really cruel with migrants, really cruel with the invisible population, a woman that makes it impossible for them. Women, and there's some women who dress up as a man, as Hitler or Mussolini. How do you fight for hope? Because I've seen that the Democratic Party, other left-wing party, are winning in the municipalities. Which is your work, your task? Probably a very, very hard work to conquer, to recover spaces for migrant women or migrants in general. Thank you. Anybody else would like to ask any questions? To have the answers all together? This question is for Silvia, mostly. I come from Latin America. They always say that Europe is more advanced in terms of human rights and feminism and so on. However, with the rise of the right-wing parties and the extreme right in many European countries, I'd like to ask you how you see the feminist resistance, if you think that women are still fighting for their rights, if that feminist spirit was still there, that spirit that was started in 2016, 2015, because now in Spain, with the people I get together with, the people I socialize with, I see that right wing is on the rise among young people. I would like to see what you think about the feminist trends among women, if there's a bit of resistance, if it's not as powerful as it used to be. Thank you very much, colleagues, for sharing all these experiences of struggles and proposals with us about the participation of migrant women and about the struggle against violence. I would like to put a feet on the ground, because it's not only fighting against patriarchy. We know that we must fight against patriarchy, but the death penalty, is it patriarchal, is it colonial, racist, capitalist, and so on? That is why many of us have questioned a feminist movement that has not focused on the villages, on the racialized migrant bodies. So our struggle should also be with strategies, decolonizing strategies. The women here, we have not invented anything, are peoples have been fighting in other territories for more than 500 years. I would like to hear these proposals, which would be very interesting. And as a colleague said, words are very important. Using the words of colonial, patriarchal, racist institutions, words that have been used for our bodies. So, for example, Western depowering, as migrants don't know anything, they are going to empower us because they have that capacity of empowering. We've seen that it's very dangerous, very risky. You have to be very courageous to cross borders. We recover the power if it's been blocked by these institutions and this violence. When we talk about decolonization, how do we fight against these instruments that are violence, not only terms, but also the policies? These terms become public policies of integration and so on, of hosting that violent towards us too. So which strategies have you been using in your organization, not only to fight patriarchy, but also against colonization?
Hola, soy Lucrecia.
My name is Lucrecia from the Amalgama Women's Association. My question is quite specific. You've been talking about systemic political violence as a part of the patriarchy. What are the chances of creating strategic alliances with feminist Eurocentric movements between them and migrant women's organizations? Silvia Federici said that we are in a neoliberal system, and the fact that women from Latin America, from Africa, and other places in the world, just the fact of migrating is a kind of violence. So, how can we generate those alliances, those strategic alliances? Because it's not acceptable to have feminist movements here in Europe where we are not taken into account and in which we do not participate. How can we deal with this? Just the last question, and then we will start with the answers. Thank you, everyone. Well, I was listening to the colleagues, but I don't recall her name. Cecilia, yes. With her call to integration, this integration requires working towards creating a lot of empathy for the cause. Sometimes our cause is used by others. When a black woman is called a monkey, for many of us, this reminds us that it would be like going back to our roots. A monkey nowadays has the privilege of being actually free. So we should turn around these concepts. We should turn around the concept of women of color. We are black, and it's not offensive to say black. It's not offensive to talk about my black friend, a black woman. So we can change the names, but the idea is
Cultura colonial, ¿no? Entonces,
it's mainly because of the colonial culture. So my question is, what specific actions are you implementing where you are in order to establish relations with people from other races, and at what level? And is that real? That would be my question, basically. Okay, let's move on to the answers, and because we are a bit behind schedule. Who wants to start? Cecilia? I'm going to answer. When I was speaking about the private space and the public space that we are given in traditional societies, that is the way that things were determined. And when we moved to the public space, women felt that we were invading their space. That is why there is so much violence at all levels, so that women study at university to become mathematicians, engineers, scientists. It was a big struggle because that was not supposed to be our space. Men did not allow us to study. Yes, we could become nurses, we could work in the social service, but becoming doctors, surgeons, even today, you face problems because that's the space for men. According to them, they think that we are invading their space, and politics was the last battlefield of this invasion of women that were not taking care of their homes. That's what they said. I do not think that. We need to be brave to go to those spaces because it is necessary and because it is our decision. It is our freedom. That would be my first answer. The second one. Our colleagues said that sometimes we use the patriarchy. No. The thing is, society is patriarchal. Unfortunately, the colonizers were patriarchs. When the Spaniards came, they brought a colonial system that was brought only by men. There were no women. We did not cause the wars. It's the men who caused wars. We do not provoke invasions. It's the men. We do not provoke colonization process. It's men. We need to kill the patriarchy. We need to fight the patriarchy and against the colonization. We have to. It's the only option. And that's why we need to be united. That's why women in political parties cannot work isolated. We need to be part of the feminist movement in this case and the women's movement because they are the only support so that we can keep saying that we need a law and the steps that we need to make. And the alliances that you mentioned, they are necessary. Migrant women in Belgium, in our collective, we couldn't just say in Louvain-the-Neuve to cook African food or to only cook Latin American food, to dance because we like to dance and to sing because we like to sing. But we were never invited to give a theoretical speech. They would not invite us for a joint project to work on the theory. And that's when we said, okay, let's stop, let's leave. We can do that too, but We need to say we're going to work on a joint project, but we are going to work on our thing. Otherwise, they'll eat us up. The colonial feeling is so strong that they think that we are weak and we have no capabilities. Alliances are important. We look for Belgian feminist movements to support each other, to work together, to work in the theory together, to learn from them, and so that they learn from us. That is the way to do things. And also, within political parties, same idea. We need to make use of our allies. Unfortunately, the fact that women are present in political parties does not mean that they are going to fight for the women's cause. We need to train them, prepare them, and educate them. Political parties are not going to educate the women in the ranks. It's up to us in the feminist movements through trainings like Gabriela's and through other organizations. We need to empower them with a gender perspective, with the women's agenda of each place, each town, each country. That's why we cannot work alone in the feminist movement. We need to get the support of the feminist movement, and African women in Belgium, they have extraordinary groups, but they have a lack of trust. They left the colonial period just recently, so they do not trust migrant women from other countries. And until they trust you, well, you need to work a lot in order to make them trust you and in order for them to start working with you. But that's the way it is.
Silvia, tenías dos o tres preguntas.
Silvia, there were a couple of questions for you.
Very brief, because it's late and we have to close the evening. I think the answer, one of the answers, is education. For me, this is the way. And of course, empathy is a very important issue. But maybe the good man can influence the other man. We work together, women to women. It's not enough. I think we have to work men to men, women to men. We have it will be better for me to work together to reach to a solution. In Romania, for instance, children are baptized, boys, they are baptized inside the altar, inside, where are girls outside. It's difficult when church is so very powerful as institution, not as belief, is so powerful from your being in this world. We can't, I think we can't make word to church, okay? Because they are almost men, priests, okay? We have to educate our boys, our children, and to work together towards a solution. Otherwise, it's very, very difficult. And yesterday evening, we were together, and we thought about an ONG at European level to unite all the organization. And we wanted to ask Silvina or you to maybe release a press release tomorrow with our decision and inviting the other organization at European level to unite. This is the moment. It's a pity to not use it.
Exactly.
Tomorrow morning I have to leave. I will not be with you. That's why, please, if you'd like to make a press release and a decision to invite, profitating the other organizations here. Thank you.
Compañeras, ¿quieren dar alguna respuesta?
Would you like to answer?
It was, hello? Well, can the translators hear me? Okay. Okay, so I think I just quickly want to answer to also what our comrade here in the front said about patriarchy and colonization at the same time. I think patriarchy is a symptom and is inherent. Okay, nothing? Ah. Sorry, we still need the mic on. There are still English speakers here who only listen.
Sí.
Okay. Better now?
Oui.
Hello?
Uy.
Testing.
Ahora.
Hello? Well, I got a sign that people can't or want to follow. Thank you so much. Or maybe I accidentally pressed something. Okay. I think patriarchy is inherent to the economic system that we live in, and I think it's vital and pressing to address what our comrade mentioned as colonization, or what we also, like maybe in the academic sphere, call neocolonialism, in a more left civil society activism sphere we call imperialism. Patriarchy is nourishing the economic system. It is a basic need for our economic system. So maybe on the short-term solutions, everything we shared here was vital and is necessary for women to have better access to political participation. But in the long run, when we all have that common ground of realizing, okay, there is a problem in our system, maybe in the long run, we have to think about other solutions. That's it from my side.
Okay, gracias. Great. Angelina, sí.
Just briefly, please.
I want to answer very concretely a few of the questions that were asked. First, about the decolonial lens and our organization's approach to this. First of all, we do our best to center Indigenous knowledge in our more intersectional topics. Recently, we've been delving more into climate and climate displacement, and so for these, we do try and invite and have people speaking at these events with first-hand knowledge and also who use Indigenous practices. Second, we do also make an active effort of not accepting any financing from the Dutch government or companies that used to be associated with the spice and slave trade of the Netherlands. So in this way, we also keep ourselves separate. As far as the question of race and collaborating with people of different races, New Women Connectors, long day. New Women Connectors is also part of the board of NR, European Network Against Racism, where our representative on there has added migration to the top agenda of the European Network Against Racism, so that is something that we also work with. As far as our organization and our events directly, we don't have any quotas. It's more of a, if you come, and we'll meet you where you are, and we'll try our best to, exchange understandings and knowledge. As for feminist alliances, we really do believe that together we're stronger, and with each of our kind of individual different experiences, different contexts, and different focuses, we can absolutely build a strong alliance, so I look forward to talking about that. And for the rising right and its response to feminism, or the feminism's response to the rising right, I think
as you said, education is key. Talking to people about the fact that destroying the patriarchy and promoting feminism is not only something that is for women, but something that can be beneficial to destroying stereotypes and things that are harmful for all of us. So, yeah.
Vale. Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much. Thank you to the speakers. The fight continues. Silvina? Colleagues, just 5 more minutes.
Muchísimas gracias.
Thank you very much. It's been an impressive round table, given all your experiences. I think that the foundation of this European network has been settled. 5 minutes, you mentioned, 5 minutes ago, you mentioned Ursula von der Leyen. This is a project financed by the European Union, so, well, you know, just to mention this. Says this is a project financed by the European Union. Unfortunately, you have to participate in an evaluation of this event. This is something that our finances requires from us. It's a QR code, it's a survey that they will send you. There are some questions about the event, but also the questions are about the knowledge about democracy in the European Union. Funnily enough, that's a survey. It's an anonymous survey, but please answer to the survey. We'll send it also via email to all the people that have registered. You have to include the name of the event and the reference code of the project as well. It's 1011 46 993. 1011. That's a code, but we are going to send you an email. Please answer to the survey today or tomorrow, the latest. It's really important. And lastly, tomorrow, the event will be a debate exclusively. An email has been sent to everyone that registered for tomorrow. It's in a different venue. It's called La Fábrica de Hielo. But tomorrow we are not going to just sit. We are going to work. We're going to have working groups. So you need to read the documentation. We will be working in 5 groups on 5 topics that have been mentioned during the day. People registered for tomorrow. We can have only 50 people. That's our maximum. So if you have not read the documentation, please take a look at it today, because we don't want to start from scratch. We want to start working on specific proposals from the onset. We close for today. The TV is here for some interviews with Lucia and Carolina. Be careful with that, please, when you exit the premises. And thank you very much for your kind participation.
Gracias a ti, mujer, y a todas.
Thanks to Por Ti Mujer, and thanks to all women for their attendance.